So, today what we're going to do is we're going to look at some advanced materials in Unreal. So last time we looked at materials in Unreal, I essentially showed you how to bring the material, some textures in that we exported from Substance, and just quickly hook them up. And in fact, if I go to the rock that we have been using this entire time, and I double click the texture.
Am I shut the flames a bit?
Yeah, go for it. This was the texture that we ended up with. All right, well, the majority of it anyway. All I've done is I've added an extra normal map in there that I can use to just add a little bit of granular detail to it. And that, but for the most part, we ended up with this guy. All right, pretty bog standard, nothing amazing, just a very quick mesh. Now, when we look at creating more interesting and dynamic materials, one of the things we need to understand is the use and the area in which that object is going to be. So we bring in our static mesh. Here we are. So lovely little area. In fact, let me just delete this guy. I don't need him anymore. Whoop. There we go. So here we are. Our standard sort of our standard rock. Now, if we were to say we have this rock underground, or if we had this overground in some sort of a forest, what's the most likely thing to start happening to this rock if we leave it for a brief period of time? It might have mold or moss growing on it. Yeah. And that you might have rain, you might have snow. Weather is going to affect this thing in some way or another. So rather than having to completely recreate this time and time again, or using Substance like we did before, which was to create a procedurally generated mask for, say, snow, if we wanted to have this rock outside covered in moss or snow or whatever like that, but then we decide actually we want to use the same rock inside for some architecture, but we don't want it to have the same moss or snow on it, we have to start thinking about how we can modulate this and create more advanced materials. So rather than using this material here, and that which just has our albedo, our metallic, our roughness, normal, and a granular normal here, which I literally just siphoned online, and my ambient occlusion, we want to be going for something that looks a little bit more like this. All right, which uses the same key pieces and that. So let me just drag this in so I can get a little bit more to my my graph. So I've still got my same key pieces here. So I've still got my my albedo, my roughness, metallic maps in here, my ambient occlusion. But it's where the normal comes in that I start to mess around. All right, so that's my normal map generation here. As you start to create more large things within more large materials in your node editor, what you can do is you can select a bunch of nodes like this, right click and go to create comment, and that'll at least sort of group them together, and then you can drag them around via the comment, which is real nice. Let's get rid of that. I don't want that comment in there. Go away. There we are. All right. So what we need to start doing is thinking about how we can add to our materials. So the first thing to do is to look at creating what's known as material instances. Anyone has an idea what a material instance is? Hey?
I didn't say anything.
Oh.
I didn't open the mouth.
I heard mumblings. All right. So a material instance is a parameter that we can create that can help modulate our area, our meshes. So say, for instance, I wanted to create a rock that looks slightly more chilled, so it would be in a more stylized theme, slightly bluer. And that. So what I can do is I can create let's create a 3 vector. All right, so you can hold 3 on the keyboard and press left click. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the material constant down here to be sort of a light blue. In fact, let me just double click this to go to the color wheel, and let's go for something kind of like this. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to then add this texture, this material. So I'm just going to drag this into there. All right, and it should give me a brief approximation of what that looked like. It is compiling a lot of shaders right now. Maybe a little bit too bright, that. I'll just bring that down just slightly, and I'll work with that. All right, but let's say I want to be able to change that color on a whim. All right, I don't want to be able to use that all the time. Maybe I want to create a red rock or something like that. Where are we? Rock. Right. So if I want to be able to change this at any given point, what I can do is, if I get my magnifier out, there we go. All right, I can right click and convert to a parameter. All right, now that won't change any of the settings I've put on there, but let me give this a name so I can call that color. All right, but what a parameter can be done is it can be edited outside of the material editor. So I don't have to come in here and constantly change this. And what it means is that if I go back into here and find my rock, and I right click my rock and go to create material instance, I call this m_rock_blue. All right. I need to actually apply and save this first. All right. So when I apply and save that, and then come into my, here we are. You can see my rock is now blue. All right. But I also have this. So this is my material instance viewer. So it will show me my prop, but it will show at the side my parameter group. So the parameters are the things that I can change. So I can now change this to be even more blue all the way. All right, I can change it to be red. All right, and I can start to mess around with these colors all I want. And obviously, if I want it back to normal, I can just drag it down to there. All right, material instances are really useful. And you can see here, I've got another one that I already pre-made. Let's bring that down. Yeah, I kind of like that, in fact. Or something a bit browner. Something like that. All right, so I already got one here for grain size, and what I've done is I've chucked this on that extra bit of normal. So you can see as I adjust this, what it's actually doing, I'll go back to here, is it's messing with this parameter down here. So this parameter is multiplied with my UV coordinates to change the scale of my UV on the fly. So if I come back here, let me just make this slightly brighter for you guys to be able to see it. There we go. So as I change this, you can see it's changing that UV scale, which is quite nice. All right. Now, if you happen to change any of these and you're not quite keen, you can literally just click the little back button here. All right, that's the default in all versions. But when you create your material parameters, don't change it to be the exact version that you want in your instance, because obviously you can see now if I turn this back to normal, it's going to automatically be blue. So I need to come back in here and just change all those back to normal. Click apply. And then I can come in here and you can see that has now remained at blue. and has not back to the default, which is black. Alright, so there we go. So that's that one. So that's material instances. So material instances are really, really good. Alright. You do, however, when you create your material instance, need to actually drag it onto the object. Alright, so that it applies. Alright. But when you drag it onto your object in your scene, it won't apply it to the full prefab. Alright, you can still, if you double click your static mesh there, you can still see it's got the original master material on it. And that, to be fair, I always like to keep the master material on there, and then when I drag it in, if I need a new material instance, I'll drag and drop and copy it from that. Alright, it just saves me having all of my rocks suddenly having this weird capability to all be blue. Alright. So, that is our standard sort of material instancing. So, from there, what I need to think about is how would I begin to add moss to this? How would I be able to do something quite like this? So if I just get rid of you, I'll drag this guy over because he's already set up. There we go. So our default rock is back again. But you can see just lightly the smattering of moss just on him there, like that. Alright, so being able to add moss like this, you need quite a few parameters. So if I bring up my material instance for this, there we go. Alright. You can see I've got all of these parameters in here. So I've got some which allows me to blend between different normals. I can change the grain size again of my object, of my normals, if I wanted to. For the most part, I'm not really going to change that, but if I wanted to, the option's kind of there. All right. I've got the opacity of the moss, I've got the tiling, and I've got the world blend max. So let me show you what a couple of these do. So let me just set them back all to default.
I don't know if this is right, but would there be more moss towards the lower parts of the rock because that's how moss grows?
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can change that as you go through, but this is just an example. All right. So blend normals. So I've got some extra normals in here. So if I basically adjust this up, I might actually need to just show you a bit more of the actual moss on this object. There we go. So if I zoom in, all right, at the moment you can see the way, it's really dark. The one thing I hate about the internal part of this, it's really dark and hard to see. So I'll just use the version in here. All right. So back to normal. So as you can see here, as I start to move this, the normals, if I go in the negatives, it's going to get real weird. All right. But as I start to move this across, what it's doing is actually blending that material into the normals of my object.
that's really cool.
All right. So if you wanted some edges to be quite sort of harshly highlighted, say for instance, if you're doing like dampness, all right, that's something useful there. All right. You can turn the moss off, or you could really just sort of ramp it up.
Yeah, that looks like.
Yep. All right. You can change the tiling of your moss as well on the fly. So if you want it to be like just really low res for some weird reason, or really ramp it up. All right. Now the good thing is about using material instances is that it's not creating a new material. It's just driving different factors from the master material. So it's just all it's doing is saying, okay, same material, just tweak this. All right, it's really, really cheap, and I recommend it if you've got a lot of repeated props with slightly different grains. You've got some which are wet, some which aren't. Use material instances. All right, it saves you a bunch of time. All right, And then we've got the world blend max as well. So you can see here how it's starting to blend that moss.
And more moss.
Yeah. Right. If I turn this up even more, you can see how that's now even more blending over our materials. But this material isn't all just that. All right. So keeping it like that, you can still see there's a fair amount of moss on there. All right. If I rotate this, and I had this in the ground, the moss has actually remained on the top. All right. And as I rotate, the moss changes sides, but it will always remain on the top. So I could actually create. Let's just get you. I have to actually.
So it's hard program to stay in there.
Yes.
Oh, okay. How did you do that?
And you can see as well, it's also aligned to the wall. So as it goes,
Oh, yeah.
as you move around.
Is that just automatic then?
No, you have to program that in.
Okay.
Don't know why it's creating a load of rocks down here.
Yeah, that's weird.
Have you got some random rocks in the environment?
I've got loads of those rocks in my environment. There we go.
But it's not entirely inaccurate. There are rocks on the ground.
Yeah.
I know.
So obviously to give you a bit more of a thing, let me just go to Alt and Alt 3. It's not liking the fact that I've got this magnifier open and another Unreal in the background. But you can see here I've got all these different rocks with moss on them in different angles, and that's still applying to them. And you can see here we've got one where sort of I've got the moss coming down on top of this, but it's still kind of still hitting this base section there. So if I wanted to, I could kind of just rotate this around, bring it in. You can see it's actually removing some of those ugly seams. If I go back to Alt and it's not liking Alt at the moment. All right. So let me just get rid of that bait light there. All right, so the seams aren't as bad because of this world texture. So if you wanted to create something like snow, you can use this to perhaps stop rocks looking as harsh if they clip into each other, because the way that snow would then work is it would then go over at your entire object. All right, so let's have a look at how this works. So rather than just doing all of this in here, this material is deceptively more complex than it looks. Because what I do is I use a thing called material functions. Has anyone heard of material function before?
I've heard the term, but I don't know what it means.
All right. So materials exist in 3 states within Unreal. So you've got a material, you've got a material instance, and a material function. So whereas a material instance is taking a material and being able to change some of its attributes that you set, a material function is something that you can put into materials to work. All right. So the way I've got this going is everything goes into my materials as per usual, like this, but then it breaks out into a material layer blend. All right. And my actual material is then layered on top of this material function here called mfMoss. All right, mf being for material function, just so I know the difference between them. If I go to where I put that, so I've left my material function in the top part here. To create a material function, you right-click, just go to Materials and Textures, and you'll see Material Function there. So the way that they describe it is a material function is a collection of material expressions that can be used in different materials. And that's what we've got. So if I double-click it, it will open up my material function. So you can see all of this here that we're seeing is actually this one node here. All right. So I've got my UV tiling as per usual, which is going in. This feeds into that, which then feeds into this, which blends with this, and my normals down at the bottom, to create this, all of this, all right? Which is it's kind of like Inception. But creating one of these is not as not as complicated as you'd think, but it's all about needing to know what each sort of node does. So, in fact, what I'll do is I'll basically recreate this alongside it. Make it easier. So, I'm just going to right click, go to material function. I'm going to call this mf_mos lesson. And just bring you up. Get rid of you guys. I've got a bunch of other materials open. So maybe I can stop my computer lagging slightly by closing. Yeah, man. And there we are. Right. Yes. So the first thing obviously you want to do is you want to get a bunch of materials, a bunch of textures for the things that you want to put in for this moss. All right. So for this, what I did is I got an albedo and a normal. All right. That's all I need to really work with for this. All right. You can introduce more than that, but for the most part, that's all I'm going to be using. All right. So I have a nice little sort of section here that I'm going to be using. So you can see I've got my moss, albedo and normal. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag them into my material function. So working with this is very, very similar to working with just the standard material editor. All right, let's just drag you down here. All right. Now, what we don't really want to be doing is messing around with the tiling of these separately. All right, we're not going to be really changing anything. We're not going to be separating any of these values or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right-click one of these and change them to a texture object. And what that'll do is it just turns it so we don't adjust the UVs straight away. Everything just comes out of a single node. All right, it's a lot cheaper to run these nodes than it is as a texture sample because it's allowing you to still break things out. All right, so get these into your scene. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to drag this over here. All right. The next thing that we want to do is notice how we're going to be creating a normal and a diffuse base color for this, but we've only got one output. So what we actually have to do is we have to make our material attributes up so that we can reuse this. The way that we do that is right click, type in material, and I want to look for make material attributes. Here we are. And what this does is that creates this. All right, we've seen this when we've created our textures, everything goes into that. And then this node is just going to pop into there. All right, so no matter what, anything that gets plugged into here is going to come out here as a proper material attribute. So let's get back to this. The first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that our texture looks exactly the same no matter where it is in the world. All right, so if we move it, it's going to start to seam together. So if we've got multiple things overlapping, very much like our rocks here. So if I just bring you in, shrink you down, and then I bring you across like so. So our moss actually looks like it runs over the top. So you can see that tiling works really nicely. All right. And it's useful to have this because if you've got, say for instance, any form of, if you've got like a tile, like you've got something that's going to smash into it and you want it to look, that damage to look the same on your ground no matter what, and that putting that damage function into it and aligning it with the world means that it's just going to tile perfectly across. Obviously we're doing it just for moss, so what we need is a world aligned texture. All right, so world aligned texture, there we are. All right. So our texture object then comes into here. And then what we need to do is we need to have our texture size. Now by default, we're going to be working at 1024. I'm just going to create a standard scalar node. So I'm just going to hold 1 and press left click and drag you into there. And change that to 1024. All right. This X, Y, Z texture, what I need to do is I need to go into the base color. Now, what we can do is there is a specific node in here. You can see already it's updated on there, which is lovely. There's a specific node in here called fuzzy shading. All right. Now, fuzzy shading basically means when you look at it, it's going to look kind of fluffy. All right. It's a standard node. Again, this is like a material function. So if you double click that, go in there, and it's got all this in there. Who'd have thought all this would be in here? So yes, if you literally chuck that into there and that into there, so when you look at it, it's going to look kind of fluffy. All right. It's really nice because then it looks like moss, which is obviously quite fuzzy. All right. The next part of this world line texture is the world position. All right, now this is the important part because obviously we want it to align to the world. All right, now what I've got here is I've got an absolute world position. So this is taking all the data from the world based on its coordinates and then I'm multiplying it with this input. All right, and this input is my UV tiling. So this combined with this gets my UVs all set. And that changes the scale of it all. All right, so let's get that set up. So right click, I want world position. There you go. All right, now some nodes aren't named the same as what they are in the drop down. All right, that's something that's quite important. So you have to kind of experiment if you're looking for things online. All right, I want a scalar, but it's an input. All right, so this is the important thing here. This is an input, which means that I can input something into it, and that's where this is here. So that parameter inputs into there. All right, so right click, type in input. You see you can only get two types. You get function input and a setup input. You want this one here. All right, now your input can be a vector 3. And in fact, it could be a multiple of things. So if we select the node, go to our details on the left, you can see all the different things that you could input. All right, we're just wanting to input a single value, which is a scalar value. All right, because this is going to be our UV editor. All right, so I'm just going to pop that in there, and I'm just going to have my preview at 1. All right, it's just so I can see what's going on. All right, and then I want to multiply these two values together so that then this value directly affects this one and vice versa. And then they're going to go into my world position, like so. So right now I could put that into my area and it would start to update based on that world position. But all is not over. We've got loads to do. What we're going to do now is set up the aligned world aligned normal because it's very, very similar. All right, it's just a world aligned normal node instead, using our normal and a bool. All right. So world aligned normal. All right, you can see all the different types of world aligned stuff in there. So if you wanted to do something more with it, such as reflections or blend types, you're more than welcome to. All right. Now everything's going to be driven using these same attributes here. All right. So my texture size is going to be the same because I need that consistency. That's going to go in there. All right. My world space is still done by this, so I want the world position there. Now this value here, world space, this is quite important. All right, and this goes back to our original yeah, I was going to say, these can get quite complicated. This goes back to our original stuff with Maya, all right, or normal maps in general. So, does anyone remember what a world space normals look like? So, world space normals or object space, all right, it looks like a heat map, like thermal imaging, all right, and it's great in all sorts of in all versions of lighting. It looks really, really nice, but it's incredibly expensive. And with video games, because we work with baked lighting, object space doesn't work with baked lighting, and that, so it doesn't work as well. If you're using fully dynamic, and that like you are usually in a film, object space can work. But in video games, we use tangent, so it's not as good when it comes to baking. So we need to make sure that we're setting that to false, so that it's using tangent space. All right, and then what you need to do from there is we literally take XYZ flat top into here. All right, we're not messing around with the normal anymore. All right, pretty much done. So whomp, there we go. Now, in some cases where you don't have a roughness map, what you can do is you can break out components. All right, so I know some of you maybe get your textures from sort of real world settings and you don't necessarily have access to a roughness. All right, so what you can do to generate your own roughness is you can break out components. So if you type in break, you can see break out 3 float. Close my magnifier down. There we go. Now when you break out float components, you can break them out into RGB. All right, so you could take the red channel from this and create a roughness map from it. All right, now it's up to you how powerful you want that roughness map to be. All right, but I recommend taking it out, running it through a power node. All right, and a power node essentially just changes the exponent of it. All right, you can see here that's what it's roughly doing to our object. All right, in fact, I never noticed that when you move it around. That's cool. All right, and you can then add a cheap contrast. You can make it black and white and chuck it in there. Or what you can do is you can just drag your roughness map into here, all right, which then is affected by this, and then just drag that red channel into there. All right, and then that is your material function done. Why aren't you working? I'm gonna have to get you into a 2 node. Right. Hang on. Vector 2. So where I can bring it down, I can remember it off the top of my head. Nope. Oh well, I'll just create the old-fashioned way then. All right. So break. Is it power first I created? No, cheap contrast first. Yeah, to create the two. All right, so this is essentially the workflow you'll use to create your specular and roughness for this. So you can see here what I've got. I've got a cheap contrast node. So a cheap contrast node works like levels does in Photoshop. So if you're unsure of what levels do, if I go into my image, adjustments, levels Levels essentially just allows me to change the contrast between black and white and the RGB channels. All right, like this. So all cheap contrast is doing this as a node. All right. I'm going to chuck you up there and it'll get cheap contrast out. So literally type in cheap contrast, wham bam, shamalam. There we are. All right. Now clamps are very, very important. Okay. Probably past 2 years, I've realised the use of these. So clamps are useful because they stop your values from getting ridiculously large. All right. So if you chuck, yeah, it just limits it. All right. But you can also reduce or increase them. All right. So if I then chuck that into my roughness. All right. If I wanted to, I could change that max default to be something like, I don't know, like 30. So it could go up to a value. I could have values of up to 30 in that clamp, and that, or I could reduce the contrast even further. Let me just chuck a clamp in there. This one was 0.5. And pop you in there and done. All right. So that's what happens when you chuck them in there. So once you've got that, you can't use your standard materials. So your material sort of attributes in here will often look like this, and we can't use a matte layer blend just to chuck that into here because it's going to go. We need it to obviously hit all of these at once. So we have to use another make material attributes, funnel that into our material layer blend. So material layer blend standard, use one of these. And then to make sure it all comes out at the same point, you select this end node here. So this is your default one that comes with every single material. All right, so you select it onto the left, and you can see here this use material attributes. If you tick this, what it does is it brings this down into a single node using material attributes. Now the reason why we only need to use material attributes is because it's all compiled here. So all of that's functioned into there. This function's got its own material attributes, and that those two are combined via an alpha, which we'll go through, into there.
So the alpha is
this alpha is driving something else.
yeah.
And let me show you what that drives. So you could literally leave it at that, have those just go into there, and all is well. However, to take this further and to create a truly modular thing that you can create and adjust on the fly without just using material attributes, all right, bearing in mind that Rock Advanced then has its own version, which is Rock Moss of its material instance. All right, say for instance I'm on this and go, actually there's a little bit too much moss on there. What I can do is I can use vertex painting. Now vertex painting is a godsend. All right, so I can select my object that I want to paint. I'm going to go to modes and go to paint. All right, colors. All right. Now,
Will it be colours though?
oh, it'll still be coloured. All right. What I'm going to do is, I swear to God,
What is it actually picking up? What's that?
I had this issue yesterday. I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. I'll go relearn this, make sure it all works perfectly fine, and I did, and it's not working. It's not. Wait. It is colour. It's definitely. Why are you not working? All right, that's really frustrating me now. Let me just. Interesting. It's not even working. It should work no matter what. There we go. Let me just flood that. There we go. Whew. Right. Turn you off. Right. Well, it's not wanting to work for me, despite me actually even having an example here ready for you. So, let me show you what it should do. So, when you have this all set up, you should be able to blend it like this. But for some reason, I swear to God if it's that. No.
You had it though.
Oh yeah, I had it, yeah. It just doesn't seem to want to work for me today. Alright.
Is this going to be in a until next time episode?
This might be.
Oh, what?
Whoa!
So, this section here, I can show you with stuff that I've got. Alright? So notice how this random section of the rock that seems to be working has no moss on it.
Yeah.
If you go to Vertex Paint and I take that off, you can paint moss onto it.
Okay.
Alright? Which is really, really cool and useful.
Right.
Alright? And it should be working.
Should be white now.
But yeah, it's very much not working.
It doesn't like you today.
It does not like me today. And it's really, really frustrating.
Sorry, I enjoy this pain. This is too fun.
And I've no idea why. Because it's applying to all of my LODs. There's nothing stopping you.
But there is.
Question is what?
This one I thought.
I swear to God if it's because of this. I think I might cry. See, I always think it's important to have these moments in tutorials because it shows that things don't just work instantly. All right. Are you going to work? All I want to do is look at the alpha channel and just watch it go away. Oh, clearly no. I have no idea why that's not working. Because it should be working off all of those channels. Either way, let me show you how it should work. So, what we've got here is the start creation of our mask. All right, what this mask does is it allows us to blend into our normals and then start vertex painting when it bloody alerts me. So, right here, I have my normals blended into this lerp. So lerp stands for linear interpolation, which allows you to blend between two materials with an alpha. All right. Now what I've got is just a blue material, a blue texture, blue value. All right, which is then driving. Well, it has the ability to blend between sort of this multiplied value of those two. There we are. And by default, it looks like this. So at the moment, it's not doing anything. And that it looks perfectly fine. However, if I change this value, it's going to stop it looking like B and start blending it towards A, which means that it's less likely to affect the normals. So if I just change to 0, you can see it looks like that. So any value between 1 and 0 is going to get me starting to blend between those two. And it's really, really useful for creating masks that you can kind of adjust, or if you want things to affect something else. Now, what I've then done is I've got it to change from tangent space into world space. All right, so it's this essentially by default, and that essentially changes it to a single reference coordinate system. This then gets normalized and turned back into tangent space so that it collects all of that information and pops it back into normal again. Now, we run it through a dot. So this one always annoys the hell out of me. But it just calculates fall off. All right. There's for some reason why this one's used rather than like cheap contrast or a blur node, but it seems to work. All right. We then make sure that it goes onto a constant bias scale so that it doesn't have any erroneous numbers onto it. And then we put that into another lerp, which then creates through our world blend max. So it's whether it then affects world space. All right, and that one, if I show you it, not on that godforsaken thing. All right, by double clicking this, popping you out, showing you there. Obviously, what that world space one does there by blending it on. All right. We then again we clamp it as normal, and then this is where we get allows us to vertex paint. All right, so you could literally just drive this straight into that multiply. All right, which then allows us to change the opacity of the whole thing, and then that's our alpha. All right, because all this is doing is creating a normal based mask. That's all it's doing. All right, but this vertex color is what drives our ability to do it. Now, what this does is you can see here it's showing us that if we paint on the alpha channel, all right, it will allow us to then change the color. All right. However, it's not doing that because it hates me. Let's give it one more go. Come on. In fact, we'll paint on all channels for this. And nope, it does not like me today. I have no idea why. It should be working. I will do it at the start of the next lesson once I figure out why it's decided not to work. But all of that then goes into here. All right.
You have to apply it in the territory.
I've applied it before and it didn't do it. And that, but I'll give it another go. It's really annoying because I got working last night. Yeah. I hate you so much.
At this point, I just want to punch them.
Yeah, to be fair, it's just as annoying. You can paint textures as well using this, but like I said, this should.
To let you.
Yeah, I'll say. This should allow me to just paint over and show you where the moss is going to happen. But no, it doesn't want to do that. All right. Let's just drag you out a little bit. Start messing with some of these values. Nope, never mind. I don't know why it doesn't want to work. That's really annoying. Because it does work. It should do. I got it working yesterday. Either way, I will show you when it decides to actually start working. So that is one way of looking at advanced materials. Now you can take all of that, all right, and there is a lot, all right, and you can create something like this. So this, I've used my own ground textures, a bunch of assets from Unreal. All right, but you can see here how you're able to create mud and slightly sort of damp dirt and footsteps, all using these same things. All right, you can then combine them into material functions and chuck them into. You can then bake them out, put them into things like Quixel.
Kind of reminds me of that level in Left 4 Dead with the Mudmen.
Yeah. With the Mudmen.
You remember there was like in Left 4 Dead 2 there were these zombies and they were like swamp zombies and they were covered in mud and they were called Mudmen. You don't remember that?
No, there was the one in the field, but that's about it.
No, there was like a marsh level.
No.
I'm not making this up.
Might be, but yeah. Either way, that's roughly what you want to be doing. Looking at materials for grounds for terrain. All right, terrain's very, very similar. You can do tessellation as well. So tessellation, all you're doing is using a tessellation multiplier, using the vertex world normal, and you need a displacement map. Give it a parameter distance, and that will create your displacement. You can see that here. We've got this lovely chunky thing, like so. All right. Now you can use all of this to create not only like moss, but you can use it to create damp. I have got a damp one, but I've already closed it. But yes, feel free to experiment with this. If you have not been on it yet, use this website, the Unreal 4 documentation. Everything you need to know about nodes, anything, they're all on here. I guarantee, sit down, read through parts if you aren't sure. They're very, very useful. All right, any questions? No? Okay.
Aside from why it doesn't work.
Aside from why that doesn't work, but I don't know why that doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, like, no, there's no question.
Yes, as soon as I do it, I'll show you exactly how. I'll just go through that bit again and show you.
I'll keep asking you.
Okay. Thank you.